Hello, I'm Michelle Leduc Catlin. Welcome to episode 2 of season 2 of Trued Up, the podcast that invites you to be the change. Today's guest has no interest in being in the public eye. Rather, his interest, his commitment is to serve the public, to serve humanity. He's not interested in politics or religion, but is directly involved with the very top of political leadership in America and follows a deeply spiritual path. But I didn't know any of this when I sat down with Steve Slepcevic. I knew only that he was a board member of MAHA. He was in charge of security for President Trump's inauguration, and I admired his wife. You'll be meeting Tracy Slepcevic, the author of Warrior Mom, in an upcoming episode. I didn't know if Steve would give me the kinds of intimate gems that I like to mine from my guests, the insights about what trues people up to their values and principles and has them put themselves in the line of fire, either literally or figuratively. But I took a leap of faith, and he leapt with me. Steve Slepcevic turns out to be one of the most heart-driven men I've had the privilege to interview. In addition to fascinating insights and stories about drones, masks, Faraday bags, disaster relief, and Justin Bieber, Steve has tremendous wisdom, and I am delighted to share it with you today on Trued Up. So first of all, welcome, Steve. Thank you so much for being here. And you actually have two special distinctions on my podcast. One, this is the first time I have interviewed the spouse of another podcast interviewee.
Okay.
And the second one is that you are the first person I've interviewed that I actually haven't met or had a conversation with beforehand.
Well, first for a few things there. So yeah, excited to get started. Yeah.
Yeah, I am too, because I don't know anybody who does what you do. And I've never met anybody who does what you do. So maybe we could start by you explaining what it is you actually do.
Okay. Well, we run two different companies. The main company is a disaster management company. So we do a lot of planning for a lot of critical infrastructure, hospitals, private airports, some municipalities, logistics centers, basically facilities that can't go down during any type of event, be it a wildfire, a hurricane, civil unrest or riots, whatever it may be, that are critical to life-saving, capabilities like hospitals or logistics centers that have timed type state things that have to be at certain places at certain times. In order, to provide life-saving equipment and resources and whatever else it may be. So we operate somewhat like a private FEMA, just 1,000 times better. And then the other company, the other company is a private security company, and in that part of it is typically mission critical type events. Everything from border operations that we've done, special missions with our drone teams and our security teams over the years. We did a 6-part docuseries called Border Battles with Charlie Kirk. You might have seen us there. And also we took Bobby Kennedy, RFK Jr. to the border. And there's a documentary, about 20 minutes, that one's a short one, on YouTube called Midnight at the Border. So basically exposing what's been going on down there.
So two questions immediately come to mind. One, of course, is that at the time of this recording, there's a lot of talk about drones in the U.S. on the East Coast. Do you have any thoughts on those? Do you know what that is?
Yeah, I mean, here's the thing that I think your listeners need to be aware of. In this time that we live in, you can't always believe what your eyes see or your ears hear. It is truly a time of spiritual awakening, because you have to tune in and use discernment. And the challenge many times is so many people get caught up in the TikToks, in the Instagrams, and these viral videos that are traveling. And part of it is there is truth in some of it, And then there's things that are meant to throw everything at it. And I think that it's also another psyop, which they have these orbs moving around that defy gravity and anything that we've seen. And then you see drones that are the size of small SUVs that are in the air for 2-3 hours. To me, you're not going to fly anything over a military base unless it's a military accepted or operated equipment. So I feel to me, and this is talking to my entire drone team, and we run the skies. So you don't have something up there that is not on a screen somewhere. It may not show up on your radar, but it's on someone's permission to be over these critical infrastructures. There just doesn't happen. It would be taken down immediately. It's not a foreign adversary, it's a government operation. That's what I see clearly. But people have to understand that putting these drones in the sky, there's a fuel source that has to run that thing for 2-3 hours. There's an operation that's being done, and you don't just not know about it. You're just American people aren't being told about it. And the truth always comes out. It's just a matter of time. I just feel that going into the inauguration, and if you see just the amount of temperature that's rising in America, that as soon as you hear the left say this is going to be a peaceful transition, if you haven't learned anything in these last 4 years, is that their Inflation Reduction Act, everything that they say, just think of it as the opposite. To me, they just continue to lie. And when you see trillions of dollars that are going to be impacted by big pharma, big ag, all these different stuff, when you have the likes of RFK Jr., Tulsi, Christie, Kesh Patel, everybody's stepping into, the tables are being flipped in these different departments. And I can tell you, in my own personal battle with my son being vaccine injured, as you know, you've interviewed my wife, Warrior Mom. She wrote the book Warrior Mom. We've been in this fight for 17 years. And so the fact that America is waking up to this stuff is great. But the other side of it is there's massive amount of money that's going to get disrupted. And those organizations don't want that to occur. The elites don't want to be found out for the underground tunnels that exist in America. And that surface is starting to crack and things are coming up to the surface. But it is truly a time of great reveal to the American people and the world. And those days are numbered. And these people, because their backs up against the wall, and the globalist and the global order is being disrupted right now, there is going to be some massive pushback. You don't do this for 40, 50 years and then just allow that train to run.
So there's a lot in what you just said. In terms of big pharma and big agri, of course, we expect pushback, right? Because their existence is being threatened. But why do you think that ordinary people have bought into that? And I recognize, particularly in the US, more and more people are becoming aware, waking up to what's happening. In Canada, where I am, unfortunately, less so. And I think because the government has such a stronghold on the media and information that's allowed in this country. But what is it you think is responsible for why so many people bought into it?
People are lazy. People are lazy. They don't want to be uncomfortable, right? It's uncomfortable to talk about the fact that a government can be so nefarious, right? That they could be poisoning millions of people. And most people want to go to their Starbucks, or Tim Hortons, right, being in Canada, and get their triple filtered water latte with their sprinkles, the right temperature, the certain amount of foam, and they're so comfortable. And in a way, it's uncomfortable to have those thoughts, right? You can tell somebody the fact they're just like, I don't want to listen, I don't want to hear this, right? It's like sometimes when I deal with people in disaster areas and you want to talk to them about pre-planning before a disaster hits. And to them, they're like, well, I don't want to talk about it, I'm too busy. It's like I'm planning for a funeral, right? No, my friend, you're going to die, right? Nobody gets out alive. You can't take it too seriously. So lighten up a little bit. Let's put some plans in place so that we can actually respond effectively. So I'm used to having those tough conversations. But the people in Canada, and I have a lot of family that live in Canada, and I love them dearly. And I have some that are very conservative that like, yeah, let's make Canada the 51st state. I mean, it's hilarious, right? And they're excited about what's going on in politics right now. I mean, it's an interesting time in Canada, but I think it's an interesting time on the globe. But Canadians, for the most part, have been programmed for years to believe in social medicine and to believe in government and to believe in insurance. And they're here to take care of us, right? And they use the Canadian kindness to like be a good neighbor, right? You have to get along, right? Let's just be kind. We're known for being Canadians. Canadians are very loving people. And they played on that. And they played on those same type of cultural things in Hawaii. They use the Ohana spirit, like be a good neighbor. You're supposed to be part of the Aloha spirit. So you're supposed to not be disruptive and go along with it. And so people don't want to be that person who's the bad guy, right? To be ostracized. But when I saw this entire thing coming down, I had a front row to this entire event because we were doing a lot of the hospitals. We were getting calls for the remediation. So when they would move a COVID patient out, they had us come in and do a protocol, the assisted living facilities of what would be needed, right? So I sat down with the virologist and the environmental consultants. I've been doing this in my entire career. I've been in the disaster planning response business for over 35 years. I got into 89. So stepping into the role, I'm like, okay, are we dealing with an infectious disease? How deadly is it? And the team sitting there, they're like, okay, we're going to set up neg air. I said, okay, great. Containment, excellent. Okay, what else are we doing? We're running air scrubbers. Okay, what are we going in with air? No, we're not. Well, wait a minute. How deadly is this thing? This is not like a tuberculosis type situation. They're like, you're not going in with air. You could just wear an N95. Okay. What are we using to wipe the walls and the beds and clean everything and sanitize everything? And they're like, oh, well, you're going to use Microban or Benefect. I'm like, well, that's the same product you use for mold. There's nothing special here. And the comment from one of the individuals was like, why are you asking so many questions? You're getting paid. I said, no, wait a minute. I know that's where you're wrong because I haven't even agreed to take the contract. And so seeing that and then seeing how people got so fear-mongered into it, including Justin Bieber. I remember going to his house to provide a proposal to fog the entire place with an antimicrobial. And the question was, excellent. So when you fog the entire house and your team leaves, how long is it sterile for? I said, it's only guaranteed to the moment that we actually pull the equipment out. Because if your mate comes in there, your security team comes in there, anybody walks in there, it's no longer considered a sterile zone, right? And I was seeing just how people were panicking. And to me, I just lived my life of don't be in fear, right? And don't comply,
It's really interesting. I've heard, I've had many, many conversations with people about the clues, right? The information that didn't add up, many. But it's interesting hearing it. I've never heard it from the perspective that you have, somebody in disaster management, in disaster relief. And I think that there are so many people on the ground in fields like yours. I've interviewed a couple of people who were PPE experts and talking about similar things. And I think that there was so little practical information that people like you, people who had experience with this kind of thing, weren't interviewed. Do you believe that was something that was managed, manipulated?
Well, of course. I mean, look, when we spoke out, our stuff got censored, right? My social media platforms got deplatformed for 9 months. I mean, it took me forever to get back online, and I had to jump through a bunch of hoops. And for me, when it first happened, and I had, maxed out all my followers, and remember, people going, doesn't that bother you? I'm like, absolutely not. It's actually kind of freeing. I don't feel like I feel like I could just focus on getting really the work done, because people always want share content. But the interesting thing was, it was so frustrating because I don't know if you interviewed Tammy Clark.
I've met her. Yeah.
Yeah. So she spoke out, we spoke out. Um, and it would be frustrating to see these people running around with masks, right? And I'm like, what are you wearing a mask for when you don't have any eye protection? This is where your viral load's coming in right into your eye sockets that are moist. It's wet. It goes right into your sinuses. This is the most stupidest thing that I've ever seen in my life. Right? It was just so blatantly stupid. There's no other way to say it, that when I hear these professionals talking about it, it blew my mind. But I started to question everything, because I was at January 5th and 6th in DC. I saw how beautifully it was orchestrated, how the production was done. I saw the reporters walking by with gas masks before anything ever happened. And us joking. I was there with 33 or so paramedics, firemen, teams from my security teams, guys that were doing the board up for our teams in DC. But I looked at it and I thought to myself, how do people not see this, of how this is being orchestrated, right? Let's call it an insurrection. I'm thinking to myself, in the 90s, when the US was bombing Serbia under Clinton with NATO for 78 days, and calling it that they're going after Milosevic for ethnic cleansing, and we're going to go bomb a Christian nation, a US ally, under false pretenses, when the Albanians had moved a terrorist group in that was funded by the US into a Serbian land called Kosovo, part of the Serbian region, for the simple fact of the US government setting up the largest military in the Balkans, the military base there. So people don't hear that. They only hear what's being sold to them through media. And in seeing the lies that were perpetrated by the US government back then, had me question a lot of things. You know, my kids, my mom didn't vaccinate us. She was an anti-vaxxer, completely pro-health. We grew up in the ghetto of LA. My parents are from Serbia. We had our own chickens, pigs, goats, ducks, whatever. Grew our own vegetables. My mom wouldn't buy the stuff in the store, and I'm like, my mom's crazy. My mom's like, no, it's no chicken. It's no taste like chicken. It has hormones, steroids. It's no chicken. And when I'd be like, hey, mom, I need to go get like 9 or 10 vaccines for them to let me back in school, my mom would be like, hey, you go tell them God make you perfect. You don't need poison in your body. I said, Mom, I can't sell that, right? I'm not going to go back to school. And I think I had the first fake vaccine card at that time, because I copied some kid's vaccine card, wrote the doctor's names. I didn't want to get a jab, right? And I wanted to go back to school. And my parents didn't understand. I felt. But then I vaccinated my kids, only for my son to be vaccine injured and go from fully functioning to severe neurological issues. That, thank God, my wife led that fight aggressively in detoxing him. And where he's 19 now, fully functioning, working full time, has his group of nerdy friends, drives himself around, flew across the country a couple weeks ago on his own. So those are God's blessings. But I feel that all the challenges that we get presented in our life, all the struggles, really makes us great instruments in God's hands to be able to use us for our purpose, for a greater good. And that being said, it wasn't to hate on anybody that was like wearing a mask. I just found that they were less informed. And so when we would get on planes, yes, I would get into arguments with the staff. They'd bring the person with the red coat in from Delta. And I'm like, listen, unless you can show me a fit test from a PPE, how this is supposed to be fitted, we're not having this conversation. So I'm going to hold the mask off my face. It's covering my face. If you want, just appease you people, right? And I'd hear comments from people around me going, yay, put the mask on, this kind of, and I'm at zero. And to be honest with you, I'm not the guy you really want to talk shit to. I'm loving, but I'm the same guy your world will change very quickly in a very loving way, but you'll be twisted up pretty fast. And so I just never went to that space. I was still loving, just at zero, because I'm not going to respond to them. They don't know.
Well, I think it's sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. No, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, I think it's so important for people who actually have the knowledge to take that stand, because you have the science, you have the education, the experience, the real world experience to be able to say that, you're not just popping off. So,
No.
I mean, I admire that. And I know how hard it was to go without, to make those arguments, and particularly for people who aren't educated about those things. You said something about the opportunities, because I very much resonated with what you said, because I do believe that this time is a time of opportunity. It's certainly a time of spiritual opportunity. You said it in the beginning about this being I can't remember the exact wording, something about a spiritual battle, spiritual time, spiritual evolution, something like that. Can you just say more about that? What is your view about the spiritual component about what's happening today?
Well, I feel that it's a spiritual awakening, not more than awakening. It's a great reveal. It's the bringing to the surface of what many people have not realized that they've been lied to for so long. And everything happens for a reason. There's no accidents. I remember standing up to it and going, I'm not going along with this. And everything inside me was screaming like, this is so wrong. And this is a spiritual battle. And uh, you may seem like the lonely voice out there. And that's what it first felt like. But as I stepped out and I trusted God in this process, and I listened to the Holy Spirit within, and I stepped out into the unknown, and I feel this is what we're called to do.
What are you called to do? And what gets in your way? There was a time when I was self-sabotaging my own goals, my dreams, so much so that I ended up with chronic fatigue and unable to work for 7 years. Have you ever had a time when you wanted to do something to produce better results in a particular area of your life, but you just couldn't seem to get past a certain point? We all have a tendency to self-sabotage, whether it's with our health, our career, our relationships, or our finances. Maybe you're experiencing that now. And I want to tell you that it's not your fault. We are bombarded with programming that is designed to keep us weak, dependent, sick, and broke. And as someone who has been weak, dependent, sick, and broke, I can tell you that you don't have to stay there. As a certified self-sabotage coach, I work with clients one-on-one to distinguish their unique sabotaging patterns and habits and teach you how to reprogram for success in any area of life. If this sounds like something that you'd like to explore, email me for a free discovery call to see if we're a fit. It's Michelle, with 2 L's and an E, at gatheryourwits.com. And now back to some empowering programming.
We're called to step into the unknown and simply trust God. And so when I saw some of the churches closing, and I was losing my mind. I'm like, wait a minute, why are they answering to the government? They're only answers to God. They're supposed to lead their flock, right? And so I saw the pastors that stood up and that fought against it. And Pastor Arthur Kozlowski, that you're Canadian, he's a great friend of mine. And I don't know if you know, but my cousin's Nick Vujicic, right? So we were at his. My birthday was actually yesterday, so he was there.
Okay.
Neil McDowell, the actor that's also in the Tulsa King, he was in Band of Brothers. He was there last night. He's again a great Christian conservative patriot, But what I found was, as this was happening, there was firefighters that came out, like John Knox, and I saw the team crossing the Brooklyn Bridge for Braves for Choice, which was Sophie and Paul and Matt and their team. And there was a group that was standing up in Orlando that was led by Jason. There's another Stephen Davis, who runs now Raising Alphas. And so what happened is, as these individuals started stepping out, I was like, I got to call him. I got to call that guy. Go get a hold of them. Let's find these guys. What for? I said, these people you cannot find on any platform like Indeed. Their resumes aren't out there. This is a character that is a rare find. These are the ones that are the diamonds. They're the ones that are going to push through. They're the light of the world. Let's join our forces. And that's what we did. Everybody came together. We led to defeat the mandates with the frontline doctors in DC at the Capitol. Then we all showed up in LA for defeat the mandates there. And then we organized Rescue the Republic in DC, which was viewed over 4 million views, the largest rally showed on that. And to be a part of the leadership team in organizing the event, providing the private security for Tulsi, Jordan Peterson, Russell Brand, all these front. And so those relationships have continued during the years. And to see now where that's transitioned, and being part of the MAHA board, the MAHA Alliance board, has been it's been the greatest gift, because now these individuals that were being ostracized, that were being canceled, that were being censored, are now taking positions because they're qualified. They're grounded, they're seasoned, they're properly qualified. And they were never anti-vaxxers. They were pro-health, and they were pro-informed consent, right? It's simple. You want to take your vaccine, and that's where people are like, oh, he's going to remove that. No, you want to take a vaccine? Great. You want a red dye number 5, yellow, blue, you want all the rainbows of the color of food dyes getting into your system? No problem. You can get whatever you want. But let me give you an insert that tells you what the harms are. So you can say, yeah, that may kill me. I may get myocarditis from it. I may get a turbo cancer from it. And yeah, listen, I don't want one jab. I want 12. I want to make sure that I stay with this thing, because I know what I'm going to get, but I'm going to take this risk, right? It's like a person who wants to jump out of a plane. Like, yeah, we're going to put a parachute on you, but you may die. So sign on the line. But here's the risk.
I mean, it's like people choosing to smoke or drink, right? There's risk, but they're adults and they know they have, the ability to have informed consent. There's a couple things there. It's been really inspiring to see a mix of people from different backgrounds, different political backgrounds, different religious backgrounds, different belief systems. I think one of the things that's a great opportunity right now is that people, on the one hand, people are becoming more tribal, but then there are other people who are breaking those barriers down. What do you see? Not even sure how to ask. What are your observations about that? It seems that people are less, what am I going to say, attached to their side, and more interested in looking for what's true, what's workable, what's right. What do you see is happening?
Yeah, I think it's along those same lines. There's no longer the left and the right. There's no longer the Democrats, Republicans. If you see what's happening, the private sector that's getting pushed into this entire administration are non-government people. They've never had government positions. They're doers. In the private sector, if I ran my operation like FEMA, I would have been fired, destroyed, gone, out of business, sued 1,000 times. I wouldn't be able to come out for air. There would be nobody who would insure my company.
So give me some examples of, what are those things that are completely unworkable with FEMA that a private company, particularly your company, would do or would not do?
Yeah. So when we're going into a disaster zone, we're planning to be there 3 days before a hurricane makes landfall. We're looking at the entire infrastructure, creating a 3D model of the building. So we have a post and a pre and post of what that building was like before the event and after the event. We're staging fuel, power, mitigation team, shrink wrap crews. We're pushing everything into it. We're looking at what is the medical response going to be like, because there's not going to be anybody showing up on the medical side of it, right? EMS and law enforcement, once winds get to 45 mile an hour and greater, they stand down. They're not showing up for you, right? So all the things that are happening, and you pre-stage all that stuff into a system to mitigate the damage, right? FEMA is reactive. They're like, okay, we know a hurricane's coming, so we'll show up we'll probably be on the ground on day 2 or day 3. Well, wait a minute. If you're going to provide life-saving services and swift water rescue teams and urban search and rescue teams, don't you think that you should be just within that range? You could be 20 miles, 15, 20, 30 miles outside of it. right? We're at ground zero. I mean, we've been through Cat 5s. We've chased tornadoes for 16 years. But we would chase the tornado knowing there's going to be an outbreak, setting up a convoy of medical professionals, meteorologists, drone teams, and urban search and rescue guys that have their engineering background to be able to cut the power, the gas, get in there and do life saving within minutes of a tornado touching down, where the response time in those areas are 4 hours. Why is a private company taking that challenge on? Why isn't FEMA or state or federal or someone involved in doing that? That's stupidity. Why are you responding to it like that late?
So what is the answer to that question?
The answer to the question is let a private company come in there and run the show. We'll show you how it's done. And people are like, oh, you shouldn't speak out against FEMA. I don't have to. I just have to show up, and they don't show up. A perfect example of it was during this last Hurricane Helene, right? We pushed up from Tallahassee when it missed Tallahassee, and Helene went through Perry and went up into North Carolina. And every emergency manager knew what was going to unfold because that area is flooded before. But no swift water teams were in place. No FEMA personnel were in place. We stood up an airport, the first airport, with a bunch of paramedics, my helicopter pilot, because I knew that to get into these areas, the only way to get into throughout the mountains is on these small LZs, helicopter pads that are in front of these volunteer fire departments throughout the mountains, the Blue Ridge Mountains along the entire western North Carolina.
So why do that? And FEMA doesn't know that. Why aren't they doing that? Why aren't they doing what you're doing?
Because the government's bloated. The government's run by a bunch of inept people. Like here, you know, like when you try to get anything done, it just, and they can fail miserably and still get paid and still have their job. And it's amazing because they'll throw so much money at these things that are completely ineffective. And the entire reason is because the model's backwards. They will spend the money, overly spend the money, so that the next year they can go back and ask the same type of money for that budget, right? But be yet completely ineffective. And people like us, they don't want in those departments. They don't want anybody in those departments on any level. Why? Because we would run it very efficient and very lean. So seeing Elon, Vivek, and our teams working on cleaning those departments up, it's an absolute blessing. And here's the other part of it. Getting targeted, I'm used to it. Bring it. You want to hit it right under the hip piece? Be my guest. I don't listen to that stuff. And all they do is actually say, he's doing the right thing. Because I always go, look, you put me on the front page of the LA Times, great. Some diary, Jones diary, great. I don't respond to them. I don't answer their calls. I got nothing to say. God teaches us one thing. You will know them by their works. That's it. I always tell my guys, stop. I don't want to hear the noise, left, right, who's here, what's that? No. Put your head down, do the work. We will be judged by our works. That's it. You don't have to like me. I'm not here to be your fan. We don't have to break bread together. I am the guy that's the most loving, but I'm also the one who is absolutely clear. And if you're not clear, you're going to be very uncomfortable around me. And that's the level of how our team shows up. When we show up, I ground everybody. I do a temperature check on everybody. I always see where they're at with their relationship at home, where they're at spiritually. And I always say to the guys, they know it very clearly that they have no business ever deploying if their house spiritually first, their relationships, their entire world is not in order. If the world's not in order, they have no business being outward focused and being out there because they can't. There's something going on in their world mechanically that doesn't allow them to be present and outward focused in service to those that are in need at that moment. So life's, right? And so sometimes a team member will be in that position where they can deploy, and there'll be other times they're like, heart to heart, hey brother, love you, but I'm not ready to go. And they know to have that real conversation. And there's zero judgment. It's, I get you. I'm going to honor and respect you. And how can I be of support for what you deserve to go through and process before you can get onto this mission? And that's how we operate.
Okay, I just love what you what you said. So the central inquiry in my podcast is why some people stand up and why others don't, why some people see and others don't. And I want to hear your response to that. But what I just heard also is what is required in order to act, what is required, like to have your own house in order, to have yourself aligned, spiritually at home and moving outward. And I think this is a really key piece, because so many people fighting in the medical freedom movement are exhausting themselves and not taking care of those things. And I will put my hand up to that myself, that I have done things backwards, that I have not taken care of the things I need to take care of, and have burned myself out. So I love that you said that. If you were to give people advice about that, and you kind of just said it, but I just want to give you an opportunity to say it in any other way you want to say it, what would you say for those who are awakening, seeing things being unveiled, in terms of how each of us can respond?
Well, when it comes to advice, I always say that the answers lie within each and every one of us. We have the answers if we're truly willing to listen. And then it's one of two things. I don't play the right wrong game. There's no such thing as right wrong. It's just information. And either it's working or it's not working. And if it's working in your life, then continue doing it. If it's not working, then don't do it, right? But all at the end of the day, your results is your feedback. And sometimes if you don't like what the feedback is, it doesn't lie. Change it, right? It's like, ooh, I don't really like my feedback. Yeah, these are my results. This is how I'm living. This is what I'm producing. So if I'm willing to be extremely accountable, if I'm willing truly to be extremely accountable, and know that it's never about the other person, ever, ever, ever about the other person, right? Everyone's doing their thing. It's never about the other person. Then you're truly going to take a look at it and go, you know what? I can choose to feel how I want. I can be angry, happy. And what do you mean? You got to be angry. No, you don't have to be angry. You can choose to look at it and go, oh. So what's the good news? Well, the good news is now I'm aware of it, right? And how did I create this situation? It's not the other person. How did I create this situation? What's there for me to learn? And where do I go from here? Right? And so when you take those committed action, you move forward in that direction, things become clear. Things become clear.
That's beautifully said. So let's extrapolate that. So working outwards, taking responsibility for that, this is the world we created. How do we have people see their cause in the matter? How do we have people see, or is it possible to have people see without, like, how do we open that up, that window up, to have people see that, in fact, how things work is how we've allowed them to work?
It's a great question. It's not my job to make them see. I can't control that. What I am responsible for is real estate in my two shoes, right? Every time I hit the floor in the morning, it's like reporting for duty. How can I be in service? So I always feel that if I do the work, if I show up in every circle, whether it be in the supermarket, how am I? How am I showing up? Am I being kind? Am I being loving? Am I being respectful? And I see sometimes, just by me living my contract and my purpose, that light will resonate and people will start to see that I may never see the results from it, right? And I know, I mean, I'll be in a space and there'll be a person who is serving me at a restaurant at the counter, and the person's wearing a mask, very kind. You could see kind of timid. And I said, really kindly, I said, are you open to some coaching? And she kind of looked at me like, that's a strange question. And she's like, yes. I said, you have a beautiful face and I'm sure you have a beautiful smile. I'm not sure why you're covering it with that mask. I said, are you wearing it because you're concerned about a virus or being sick? And she's, well, yeah, I don't want to get anybody sick. I said, well, you don't have that ability. You don't have that ability to make somebody else sick. If their immune system's weak, they will get sick. And I said, if you're using it to protect yourself, your eyes aren't covered, and that mask you're wearing is only good for 30 minutes. So how are you changing the mask every 30 minutes? And she's like, well, no. And I said, well, the issue is that the fibers then become loose. You're breathing that stuff into your lungs. There's bacteria that's forming on the interior of your mask. That's not helping your respiratory problem, your respiratory issues. So that's actually compromising your immune system, which will make you be more susceptible to getting sick. So if you're looking for a healthy alternative, just take the mask off. And she looked at me, I said, but you can give yourself permission. Just give yourself permission to take the mask off. And when it was presented like that, like, go ahead and just give yourself permission. She took the mask off and I was like, you've been hiding that beautiful smile this whole time. What's wrong with you? And she started laughing, right? And then she was like, oh my God. And I've had multiple people, again, you could see what the space are. And if you're tuned in spiritually, you're not going to piss the person off. If you're thinking, I'm going to piss the person off, guess what? You're in a space that you're presencing pissing the person off. And I promise you, you'll piss the person off. You know what I mean? So
it's such a beautiful example. And I know exactly what you mean, because I remember the days when I would go out without my mask, I would, in my, view, I would surround myself with love, right? It's like, I am just going to emit love, and I would have no problems, and I would be surrounded by people wearing masks. But on the days where I felt like resentful, I just didn't go out because I knew that I would be putting out that energy, that if I'd be inviting a conflict, right? Which I don't want. But that was such a great example. And just a little bit of knowledge, first asking permission, sharing a little bit of knowledge, and then, making light of it and sharing a laugh with her. That was beautiful. That was beautiful. Have you always had that kind of approach? Is that how you have you always come at life with that kind of approach? And if so, where did that come from?
So not always. I come from a loving family. My parents were just amazing. I couldn't have had asked for better parents. They were very deeply rooted in their faith and their Christian faith. We were raised kind of like the Mennonites, in the hood, right? I learned English in kindergarten, but I fought my way through school nonstop because in the 70s and 80s back in LA, especially areas that we grew up, the Bloods and the Crips ran the streets, and Mexican gangs were out there. It was a rough. The gang unit eventually got established through LA, LA Police Department, and it was a rough time, but it was a great time because it created the warrior in me. But in the same space of that, when you're in that stuff and you're dealing with a lot of violent people, there's also, you learn how to be loving too, right? You learn how to de-escalate type of stuff. But I think that all the battles that I've been through in my personal life, I've been held back in so many different scenarios and lost everything and had a multi-million dollar company, and just seeing how God uses those moments of just, I'm going to refine you. I'm going to make you a warrior, and you're going to lead many people, and you're going to do some amazing things, but I can't use you when I was arrogant, when I had a chip on my shoulder, that doesn't serve. And so one of the greatest trainings that I took on, which was in 96, May 5th, 1996, was a training. And it's not a church type thing. It's not a Tony Robbins rah-rah type thing, but it was run by a family that had been in the concentration camp, the founder of it. And it was in Utah. It's called Impact Trainings. And it was truly one of the greatest spiritual journeys of work, for me to take a look at how I do life and how I show up. And it truly was one of the best starting points. What I mean by starting points is then it came into the work. And it's not enough to read the Bible. Like I grew up in a very conservative church where we went literally Thursday nights, Friday nights, and 3 times on Sunday, right? Every week, that since I was a kid. I got to be about 19 or 20, and I told my mom I'm not going anymore. And she's like, "What do you mean not going anymore?" I said, "Mom, I reached my quota. I way retired early. Most people go to church maybe once a Sunday, twice a Sunday, but I went all this time. We had song services. I was a youth pastor, led the youth group, sang in the choir. I was in a quartet. I'm like, I am so done, right? But it wasn't about that. I got tired of religion, right? I got tired of the judgment that went around it. And a part of me was resentful for it for a while until I woke up and I realized that it wasn't about the man. I was focused on the man. And that's not the spiritual side of it. The spiritual side of it is beauty. And everybody else struggles with their ego mind, their persona, their judgment. We're raised with so many different picture shows. And doing more work on the spiritual side of it, doing more work um, in meditation, and doing, honestly, when we're showing up in this different disaster zones. I remember seeing this young little boy and girl standing on top of a tornado of a house a tornado just destroyed their house, and going as we were driving through that neighborhood slowly. We're in uniform, right? And the look on their face was one of complete desperation. And then the connection of just looking at them, all of a sudden their eyes lit up like, oh my God, help is here. There's hope. And then I realized, wait, our greatest work is that human to human connection, whether it be there or standing next to a kid who's special needs, is coming across our border, and who the sheriffs were apprehending. And this kid was 17, 18, but reminded me of my son. And this kid started to sensories overload. Things were starting to go up. And the cops, the sheriff's department was there, and they're starting to freak out. And I'm like, whoa, 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 I got this. I got this. I got this. Stand back, right? Because they didn't know what was going on. They thought this person was freaking out, but his sensory was going off the roof. So he was about to lose everything, but that could cost him his life, right? So that's the greatest work. That's the greatest work, is serving in those moments across our nation, wherever God puts me, to bring them to the next space. And I feel that as we step out, we give permission to others to step out. And in being that light, you light the next light.
Everything you take in with your senses, everything you hear, see, eat, and surround yourself with is programming you to succeed or fail. Over the past 5 years, we have all been subjected to an enormous amount of disempowering programming. If you're anything like me, you have experienced a point where all the information you were taking in was actually damaging your health, your relationships, your productivity, or all of the above. It's why I produce programming to empower people, and it's why I became a freedom from self-sabotage coach. We are living in extraordinary times, and we will either succumb to the constant negative programming, or we will become alchemists and transmute our challenges into victories. We will become the people we've been waiting for. If you're interested in working with me, either in a group or one-on-one, as a coach or a speaker, just email me at Michelle, with 2 L's and an E, at gatheryourwits.com, and let's have a conversation. Now back to some empowering programming. I just want to sit with that for a minute because that really resonates. It's beautiful. I imagine it must be so rewarding to do what you do.
It is, and it's a spiritual work. It's none of the you can pull people out of piles and build buildings, and bring medical aid across the country and do all the things that just comes with doing the work. But the greatest work is that spiritual work, right? To see somebody come from an awakening, to taking on their life, to healing their relationships. I mean, that's one of the things that we talk about among just all the brothers and sisters, part of our network, right? Is we're called to be protectors, right? God calls us to be those that how we show up in our lives, how we show up with our families, our kids, and then for those that we don't know, we're not there to be called anything but God's children, serving God's children. We're not there to be called, first responders, heroes, none of that stuff. And if you talk to anybody who's showing up in that space, that at the core of who they are If it's not that and it's not spiritually led, they should find another career. They should find another career.
How do you think for people who, there are many people who don't live inside a purpose. And I think we are naturally drawn to want to live inside a purpose. Yours, you've been through quite this path. I read that your father said you were going to be a doctor. And then you got into construction. And here you are, working across the country, making a difference with all of this. And now, which I want to get into a little bit, planning security for the inauguration. How is it you think people find that? How do you access that purpose?
You know how? In the struggle. I'm telling you, you know what? If anything your listeners take from listening to this interview, look forward to the struggle. Yeah, look forward to the struggle. It's going to be, welcome it. And when it shows up, lean into it, because that is when you're going to learn the most. And if you don't have a struggle, then step into a grid down course. We run grid down courses, right? Where you're off the grid for 3 days. You're building shelters, you're processing an animal, you're taking on force, you're running security ops at nighttime. It is uncomfortable. It's miserable, right? But in those, it's the same thing like when you meditate, right? Go on a fast, meditate, let your body purge and get really uncomfortable, because in there is where all that stuff moves away. And I feel really the downloads, the voice of God, you can start hearing that, right? There's so much, we're not meant to be comfortable. That's the problem, is everyone struggles to be comfortable and they don't want to get uncomfortable because it's like, I don't really want to get into that, And I'm like, man, lean into it. Because that's really where so much growth happens.
I think you're so right. And it's true. It's like everything that we are told is, you just want to be more comfortable, right? Everything's about ease and comfort and just making things as accessible and easy as possible. And it's like, that's the thing we're being trained to strive for. And yet there is no growth there. And ultimately there is no satisfaction there.
Here's the thing. There's people in their heart of hearts go, you know what? I can't stand my job, right? I go in and I punch a clock and I do something that means nothing. And I'm like, then why you do it? Well, because I need a paycheck to pay my bills. I'm like, you're dying a slow death. Don't you feel dead inside? Are you living your purpose? Are you living what you feel is burning inside you that God has called you to do? Are you living your mission? Are you living your purpose? Well, if you're not, why aren't you? Well, because I got to feed my family. You're going to feed your family, my friend. God's never let you down, right? He's promised he takes care of his sparrows. I mean, every hair is accounted for. And yet your faith is you don't believe in that, because that's what you're telling me. Oh, I really want to do that. But no, do you really? Because if you really, really wanted to do it, there'd be nothing standing in your way. And this is not a pep talk. It's the reality of it. My life got derailed many times because I was in resistance. Like, well, this is how I identify. And God goes, no. Why are you fighting for your old self? And I'd look down below and there's a new set of tracks, and the voice was very clear. Like, that path no longer serves you. Look below you. There's a new set of tracks that's going in that direction for your greater purpose. So stop fighting me and start trusting the process.
I love that. Stop fighting for your old self. That's a real gem. So you are now in a place where you are preparing for, and I don't know when this interview is going to air, but you are currently preparing, or you're about to be preparing for the inauguration. Is that correct?
Yes, we're preparing for it. Yeah.
Okay. So what is that experience for you? I mean, I know you've prepared for many things, but this is, it's kind of the biggest thing. What is that experience like for you?
I don't I don't know that I see it any different, right? So I've lived my life in the present and knowing that there could be all types of scenarios that play themselves out, right? You know, um, we prepare as best we can. So we have secure phones that our entire team operates off of, which is end-to-end encryption. Anybody tries to hack the phone, the phone scrubs itself, clears itself. You can't get into it. It's what we call, like many people know it as a de-Googled phone. There's no apps on it. It's just end-to-end encryption for messaging and secure phone calls. We have our sat radios, which are radio, satellite radios. And then we have our sat phones, and everything's in Faraday sleeves. And our backpacks all have bulletproof shields on and Kevlar on them. So you have a medical team and you have a security team. And then you have an intel team that's listening to all the chatter and the stuff that's going on. Chatter from a potential dirty bomb, chatter from the fact that the telecoms companies have been hit by the Chinese hackers, right? What is true? What is propaganda being fed to us by this weaponized government that's currently in position, right? Oh, there's a satellite, that was launched by Russia that can take out our satellites. Well, Lily, is that the truth? Or is this going to be an inside government job? Or what are we going to expect, right? So we always prepare what to expect when you're expecting a major crisis. So you do an all scenarios type disaster crisis response. And we'll work with Capitol Police, with the Secret Service, and with the fire department and everybody that's going to be running incident command for that day, because we have these relationships in place. And at the end of the day, it's like anything else. You're going to move in and out of an environment with high level people, because this is what we've been doing. This is under Saber Defense Team, right? So the operators that are, and I have a great team that's based in DC that are trusted, that I know very intimately, right? This is not a place where we ever bring a new person on. And people are like, oh, how do you get hired? Well, it takes a long time. And even when you get hired, you're not getting put on a detail like this, right?
Yeah.
So people sometimes don't even know they're being interviewed in the process. It's a long process, and it's a team process. The person's out at the range, they're on the training, they're having breakfast. We're watching them on every level and putting them into some very uncomfortable, compromising situations to see how they respond. And they don't even realize that they're being interviewed. It takes that type of stuff where their guard's not up, where they don't know they're being watched. And, I don't have any fear. I always believe that God has us protected. And whether I'm fighting the battle, or I'm doing it here on earth, or I'm serving the angels up in heaven, and I'm leading an army up there, whatever it looks like, I'm here simply to serve his purpose, his mission. And there's no greater honor, right? Because I always say to people, unless you've had that conversation that you're ready to go at a moment's notice, and you're going to lean all the way in, and you're ready to bleed for the cause, I can't use you. God can't use me if I'm not willing to go that distance. And most people haven't had that conversation, and they're not ready. Do I want to? No, I want to love my family. I want to be here for my family. But however God's mission is, and his purpose is, I'm here to serve until he calls me. It's that simple.
I have a couple of practical questions for you. One, you mentioned the Faraday bags. Now, I use a Faraday bag. How well do they work? When should we use them? What's the point of using them?
So we've tested some Faraday bags, and there's some bags they even sell online that are made in China. They're useless. You put your phone in there, it doesn't go dark, and you could hear it ring through there. A good place to get bags is a place called Go Dark Bags. And again, I don't have any affiliate codes. I don't do that. Go Dark. Escape Zone is another one that's made by Navy SEALs out of San Diego. I know them. They're high quality. They're great bags. We keep our radios in those escape zones. And then there's also sat123.com, who has the secure phones. They have the satellite phones. They have the sat radios. And they also sell Faraday sleeves in there. But again, look for the ones that are actually dark bags, not Go Dark, and Escape Zone, which is Escape Zone and dark bags. I find the better quality. And again, when it comes to satellite phones, if your comms go completely dark, which I feel will be one of the main things that they do, that's just my take on it. You may want to have at least get a satellite rental, get a satellite phone rental, or get a the Starlink. I mean, we have two Starlinks. I have one at my house, but I have two mobile Starlinks that we keep in Faraday bags, and they're protected because we use them for mobile. So if there is an EMP, and if you see the drones that are flying low, those things are emitting transmission because it's keeping other drones from coming up into that space and even getting off the ground. So they're creating jamming signals from those drones. It's so easy to outfit those drones with EMP blasters to actually kill comms in that entire area. So if I were to do it, if there's people that are uprising against something that's happening, that's what I would do. I would jam the signals. Communications controls chaos, right? And in the world we live in, if your phone's dead and you can't access the internet, you're standing still. You're not getting intel.
So I've had a Faraday bag that I got a text through. So I realized, wow. So that's partly why I asked. It's like, okay, that's completely not working. Do you recommend that people, what is the threat of technology to the average person? Do you recommend that people get Faraday bags, and why?
I do, because that's the area that's going to get, that's one area that doesn't protect the phone. And electronics, they're going to want to hit electronics. If you see, they killed comms in Bangladesh when there was an uprising completely. Phones and internet was down instantly. That's how government controls chaos. And Obama installed the kill switch. Everyone's aware of that. And when they give the senators on the left actual satellite phones in case of a crisis, no one pays attention to it, right? Well, why would they need it? Right? When you have 60 tons of ammonium nitrate go missing and only 3 tons it took the Oklahoma City bombing building down, but no one's accounted for those 60 tons of ammonium nitrate, right? When they talk about these chemicals that are being moved around that can create a dirty bomb, there's just so much. And if you pay attention, if you listen to Karen Kingston, have you interviewed Karen Kingston?
I've interviewed her, but I've listened to her many times. Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, some of the information that she's showing on H5N1 that's potentially may be rolled out in January, and how they're now pushing for the inoculation of cows and chickens and testing, right? As soon as you start testing, that just gives you permission to vaccinate, right? So it's the next rollout for Bill Gates, who owns the GMO companies, owns the Beyond Meat, and it's an investment. He wants to make the next billion. What? Stop to have people eat meat and go buy the lab meat that he owns, right? Guess what? His share value goes through the roof. He makes billions more. These are sick people. And so you just got to follow the money. I mean, the globalist agenda is on full display. Global order is being disrupted right now. And people don't understand, but we have already won. And they're like, what do you mean we are? I said, because the narrative that you're having at your kitchen table, in your markets, it's given people permission that it's okay to talk about vaccines. And it's okay now to talk about the food poisons, the toxins that are in people's food. So now this is being shared everywhere. I mean, this is unheard of. And for us that have been in this battle for 17, 18 years, up against this thing, to actually now be mainstream and them not be mainstream anymore is beautiful. To have podcasters like yourselves be where people get content now. They don't get content from mainstream anymore. They come to people like us that, like, even when Dell, when with Hurricane Helene, right? We're on the tarmac and he's like, hey, I need you on the show. I need you to go live. I said, Dell, I'm sitting here. There's actually aircraft landing and taking off right around me. He goes, I don't care. Hold your phone up and we'll just go live from location. Yeah. And that's become the norm. And it's interesting because I used to be one of those reporters that would get information from NBC, Reuters, and these are great friends of mine. But as soon as I started speaking out to the truth, they're like, I love you, Steve, but I can't use you anymore. I'm like, why? Because you don't want the truth. I said, and I'm not political. I'm just like, hey, here's what's going on. Oh, you can't show that. I'm like, what do you mean I can't show that? That's what's going on. You know what I mean? So It's completely shifted where people are like, you know what? They don't believe the garbage that's being propagandized out there. That's run by big corporations that are funding and advertising there. So it's all scripted, narrated, and filtered for a cause to lead people like sheep in a certain area. And then people are going, hey, I want the real information. What's going on there? I want to see. And they're picking it up from people like you that are willing to be the truth sayers, to be the true patriots in a time. This is our 1775 going into 1776. This is our time. And when the shift happens, the other side, this is where they rise up. And it's look, I always say, pray for peace, prepare for peace. And people are like, what do you mean prepare for war? No, prepare for peace. If we all shift in that direction, it's hard for them to show up on a hill and no one's going to be battling them. Now, when they move those type of things to cause those disruptions, I always say, don't get into the streets. Be careful. Notice the information before you move. Get all the intel before you move a team into an area, right? Because otherwise you're getting sucked into that stuff. And that's why for us, we didn't get sucked into I saw what was happening at the Capitol. And it was just like, yeah, we don't want any part of that. I could see exactly how it was being staged. And now the information's coming out. But back then, I was the one who was a conspiracy theorist. What do you mean there's agents? There's no agents. I said, yeah, there was agents moving within the group. It was so obvious, you know. You know.
How do you stay positive, centered, joyful about life, and keep your eye on what's happening? You know, how do you find that balance, or how do you manage that?
Because God has blessed me so richly, right? He gave me this thing called life, and I'm in forever in gratitude, you know. And I there's always people suffering at a level that most people won't ever understand. And I've been blessed to be in some of the most horrific disaster zones where I've seen people lose everything from family members, um, dealing with child traffickers and the victims, and seeing the pain and the suffering and the horrific side of it. Um, I will live a life of being forever in gratitude. I have to remind sometimes even team members, I'm like, where they're, you know, they've been uncomfortable, it's miserable, it's hot, the wheels are coming off, there's no food, it's miserable, right? And I'm like, hey, check yourself. Notice where you're operating from. And I'm like, you know what? Just be a self-cleaning oven, my friend, because look around you. And like what I said, look around you. These people don't get to leave. They get to be reminded every day for the rest of the foreseeable future. They will stay here. They'll be remembered that that's how person burned down in that house. That person lost their business. This family relocated. These are the horrific stories that they will become part of their fabric. It's a PTSD that people in those disaster zones live with and then carry on generationally, right? A lot of those traumas never heal. I said, be grateful that you get to go home. So notice yourself, be outward focused, step into it, and be in service. Because the those are, and that's really what really kind of comes down to, is just to be reminded of just how many things God has blessed with me. So I can never complain. I got nothing to complain about ever.
Thank you so much for this. This was a very rich conversation, and on a personal note, one that I really needed to hear and have. So thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. It's been a pleasure. God uses us to speak. Like I always say, people are like, what are you going to say on the interview? I'm like, I don't know. Let the Spirit speak to me, right? And maybe somebody out there deserves to hear a message that then serves them in healing a relationship that deserves to be healed, you know, or a challenge that prompts them to go, wait a minute, what am I doing with my life? I'm meant for more than that. And God's been speaking to me, and now it's the time for me to step in and be in service, however I show up, you know? So thank you for having me, and thank you for continuing to spread the truth out there.
It is my honor. Thanks, Steve.
You're welcome. Thank you.
In our culture of convenience and emphasis on ease, we often forget or don't even recognize that pain is where growth lives. We are constantly sold the idea of pain avoidance, of numbing ourselves with alcohol and caffeine, comfort foods, drugs, retail therapy, pornography, mindless television, of bread and circuses. Steve Slepcevic reminds us to push into the struggle, to transmute our suffering into our strength, and to use all our challenges as opportunities. It's one of those lessons that we sometimes need to learn more than once. My second major takeaway from our conversation is about personal integrity, about having our house in order before we give to others. With all that's happening in the world, it can be easy to burn ourselves out, which I personally have a history of doing. But we do no favors to anyone when we deplete our resources. And my final life lesson in this conversation with Steve Slepcevic, among many I could name, is to stop fighting for your old self and start fighting for your purpose. The universe is constantly expanding, and if we don't expand with it, we stagnate and experience pain. And then we want to numb ourselves with bread and circuses. We can resist what is happening, or we can give ourselves to a purpose that inspires us and lights a way for the world. If you'd like, share any of your own insights in the comments section and hit the subscribe button. Stay tuned, be true to yourself, and remember that we are the ones we've been waiting for.